Hi, everyone. I'm Taney Roniger, and today I'm going to be talking about my most recent show, which was at a wonderful gallery in Birmingham, Alabama, called Ground Floor Contemporary. The gallery is run by, it's an interesting space. It's run by members of an artist collective there that goes by the same name. And I was honored to be invited to be this year's visiting artist, which meant that not only did I have the show down there, but I got to spend some time getting to know the members of the artist community there. And I must say that I had an incredible time all around, but the trip was really refreshing and invigorating, reinvigorating, because, you know, we New York artists rather arrogantly tend to forget that serious art is being made in other places. And indeed it is. And, you know, I mean, it's being made all over this country and certainly, you know, beyond. Yeah, there's a lot of really serious artists in Birmingham. Great discussions, you know, just really had such a good time all around. So I do want to thank Sarah Garden Armstrong, who is the founder and I would say director of the space, and the chief assistant, Jennifer Marshall. So big thank you to them for this incredible opportunity. So I thought what I would do today is begin by showing you some pictures of the installation at the gallery. You know, I'll talk a little bit about the work, and then I will stop the share at a certain point and we'll have a little theoretical interlude. Not that theoretical, but I'll talk about my ideas, sort of the things that I was thinking about, what inspired the work for the show. And then we'll go back to the images and end that way. I'll show you some installation shots, by which I mean photographs from the process of installing the work, which are actually kind of interesting. All right, so let us begin. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So, yep, this is the front window of the gallery. You can see downtown Birmingham and the reflection there. Great old building, just beautiful space. It's not a huge space, but it's sizable enough, and you know, right in the storefront window. So it's a great place to show. So it has three walls. The other wall is glass windows, which will feature prominently in the presentation later. But so this is what you saw when you walked in, and you look to the left. There are two large drawings. We decided we didn't want to crowd things, right? I could have hung a bunch of drawings on the walls, and I like it when drawings have space to breathe, especially these. You know, they just need space. So it was three pieces in the show total, and that's what you have when you look to the right. So this is the smallest piece in the show. This drawing is about 52 by 72 inches. So it's not tiny by any means, but it's small relative to the others. All the drawings in the show are from my a series I call the Myyrmaki drawings. And I'm going to be talking about the series title a bit later in our interlude. But for now, I can just say that Myyrmaki is a church in Helsinki, Finland, or just north of Helsinki. They are made with charcoal primarily, graphite secondarily. All the white that you're seeing is the white of the paper coming through. I use no white drawing materials. The process is a painstaking process of accrual, let's say. I'm working around the white areas because I have to keep them kind of pristine. You know, when charcoal gets rubbed into paper, it's very difficult to race back out at a certain point. So I'm working around the white areas, going band by band. You can see, I'll show you a detail in a minute, but you can see there are these horizontal bands. Each one is constructed, drawn very carefully, and takes a long time. And then only at the very end do I get to those white areas. And what I'm after really is the glow. Of course, it's meant to evoke light, but it's got to glow. And every time I go to do this, I forget how to make it glow. So I have to learn all over again every time. And I'm sure there's a reason for that. Every piece of paper is different, perhaps. So this is what you had looking to the left. So a bigger piece. This is, I think it's about 50 by 96 inches. Here we have it from the side. And here we have a detail. Okay, so here you can really get a sense of the bands. The bands are, I don't call them stripes because they're not flat. They have a little bit of a gradient to them, each one. In this case, moving from dark to light, left to right. And that's important to me, that they have a little bit of volume, because I want them to feel like things, tangible things. If they were just stripes, they wouldn't feel this way. And the horizontal line, so if they become things, some of the horizontal lines or the events, let's say pictorial events happening on the bands, some will appear as if they're happening right on the bands. Others, as in the one on top here, look as though they're happening somewhere behind. It's like the bands are slightly diaphanous and you're seeing this thing, this horizon through the bands. Translucency is really important to me. It's something I think about a lot. How to create, things that look like you're looking through them and seeing other things. I'll give you a little bit of a closer view. There you go. Here you get a sense of the grain of the paper. It's not a completely smooth surface, although it is hot press watercolor paper. The grain is really important to me. I work it. I rub this pigment into the paper and try to pull out the grain, make it more visible than it might be. Because there's just something about that it just needs to feel like it needs to elicit, let's say, a longing for touch. I just realized not too long ago that for me, the impulse to draw is actually a physical need. I didn't realize that. I thought it was, I need to engage things visually, but it's actually the need to. These drawings are very hands-on, right? I'm right there. Nothing mediates between me and the paper. It's just, the charcoal, I'm rubbing it into the paper. I have a physical need to do that. So touch is central to my work. Texture. And it's something that people always pick up on. When they see the work, standing in front of it, they will always comment on the fact that the texture is a really key component of the effect. I will throw in parenthetically that when I was an undergraduate, this is in the 90s, I was making very texture heavy paintings, like texture constituted a lot of the visual incident. I had a professor say to me, elderly male professor said to me, yeah, these are nice, but of course, textures is the handmaiden to painting, the handmaiden. So I got sort of a complex about texture at a very early age, being sort of inferior to, subservient to, there to serve the optical element of drawing and painting. It took me a long time to work through that. It was clearly, he was wrong on many levels. touch is crucial. It's really important to me. Texture is important to me. It's, bodily, right? We can argue that the visual is bodily as well, but touch even more so. So that's crucial. This is the third piece on the right. As you can see, there are no bands. Well, there are bands, but not the kind that sort of make up the ground, shall we say, of the others. There are no bands here. Instead, it's a just kind of an atmospheric field, atmospheric space. And then these trying to think of a word for them, rods, I guess, let's call them rods, are suspended in that space. Sort of the illusion is that they're overlapping each other, sort of looking through the ones in the front to the ones in the back. Let's see, do we get a close-up? There it is from the side, and here we have a close-up. So here you can see something of the grain there on the left. Again, taken a long time to pull that out of the paper. Another thing that takes quite a bit of my attention is the nature of the edge, the character of the edges. Some edges call for being sharp, others soft. I spend a lot of time working and reworking the edges, trying to get them right. People often say to me, when looking at my work, oh God, it must be so meditative to do that. I can tell you emphatically, no, it's not. It's hard labor. It takes so much attention and just technical skill, I guess you would call it, that is really not very meditative until the very end. Okay. In the very end, when I'm just like, precising edges, and I know I have something that's going to be good, just, tweaking, making little nuances, then it's quite meditative and I'm relaxed. But otherwise, no, not at all, just the opposite. Why would I do something that, takes so long, requires so many hours of my time? Well, I want it to look a certain way. I want it like this. There's only one way to get it, right? It's not that I'm, although earlier I did say I have a physical longing to touch, that is true, but that's not quite, this meditative zone that other artists get into. I do not. A very interesting thing happened every day. Round about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the light started streaming in through the windows. And I just loved, the drama that it created every day. I mean, you could sit there and watch it move, right? Watch it move through the space. These, these rectangles and bands. And of course, the work is very much about light, okay, about the physicality of light as a material presence. So this was really great. It was really fun to watch. Such drama, right? And the drama of the light coming in really kind of activated the much quieter drama of the light in the works. Here it is inverted. Kind of like it that way. So that was a nice segue into this. This is indeed the Myyrmaki church that I spoke of at the beginning in Finland. I'm going to now stop sharing and we can talk a little bit about that. So I have not been to the Myyrmaki church myself. I'm only familiar with it through photographs. I read a lot about it. But as soon as I saw the images, I knew I wanted to make work that evoked the same kinds of feelings. So the way that I discovered the church was about 2 years ago, I was asked to write a book review of a book called Architecture is a Verb by Sarah Robinson. It's a work of nonfiction, kind of a theoretical work about an emerging movement in architecture that really appeals to me. It's very exciting to me. It's a response, partially, it's a response to postmodern architecture, which is, in the words of the author, it's a response to the inhumanity of postmodern architecture. A lot of that was about spectacle, right? Creating spectacle, and very much about, the ego of the architect, right? Showing us all that he or she can do. Well, this new movement responding to that is about bringing the human body of the actual user of the environment, the built environment, bringing that back into the center of the design process, right? Design and construction, bringing the body back into the center. The body is the thing that buildings actually serve, right? The body of its users. So in part, this is a response to postmodern architecture, but perhaps even more, it is a direct response to recent findings in the cognitive and neurosciences. Anybody who has read the work of George Lakoff and Mark Johnson will know a little bit about what I'm going to say about that. But it's basically the main things that have been discovered about human cognition. The body is an intelligent body. It's a knowing body, right? A lot of our intelligence comes from there. The greater bulk of our intelligence is, housed in our bodies. So different from what we've been taught in this culture to believe, that mind is somehow separate from the body. It's superior to it. Reason is somehow, it comes from somewhere else. It doesn't arise from our physical being. It is now known that indeed it does. In fact, the whole of our conceptual apparatus, what we use for rational thought, directly derives from embodied experience. Also, I'll throw this in because I'm fond of saying this. It has now been, determined that a good 98% of human thought is unconscious, right? Thought, not just emotion, but thought. And a lot of that, happens in our body, like well below the level that you could even be conscious of it, right? It's not just that you're not, but that you couldn't be. And then finally, there are other things too, but these are the main sort of discoveries that this movement is responding to. The human body is a resonant body, meaning that we are in constant communication with our surroundings, with whatever environment we're in. We can think of it as like we're receiving and transmitting information constantly, not just with other human beings, that's for sure, and with other living beings, but indeed with things, okay? We respond deeply to materials in our environment, the shape of spaces in our environment, light, the quality of light. Again, all beneath, the radar. We respond and feel and think far more than we think we do any of that. So the implications for architecture are pretty obvious, right? I mean, the shape of our built environment really affects us, whether we know it or not. If we have inhuman architecture, does certain violence to our being. I thought, when I read this book, I was so excited about that. I thought, well, of course, this applies to visual art too, right? If the things that we make, we tend to think that we're really not that important culturally, but it turns out that actually we are. If we're making things that go out into the world, they are doing something, right? They're not just sitting on walls, they're actually doing things to people. Again, back to architecture, the shape of space, the shape of a space that you're in, the kinds of materials you're surrounded by affect not just your mood, but your consciousness. That's huge, right? For example, being in a wooden room surrounded by wood, beautiful wood, is very different from being in a room made of, let's say, plastic, right? Whether you're even aware of it or not, your feeling, your general affect is being determined in large part, by your surroundings. So this is huge. This is huge for art. The author of that book does not go into the visual arts, but I've taken this on myself because a lot of recent art has been in some way or another social critique, right? Critique of capitalism, critique of, racism, critique of, homophobia, what have you. All that has its place for sure. But what I would like to see more of is art that actually affirms, an affirmative art, sort of balance out the critique, and not just affirms, but that supports, let's say, human flourishing in the world. That's what I want to do. I've known all along that my work is always addressed, let's say, to the body of the viewer. I've known that all along. Comes from my body, directed at bodies. That's the language that it speaks. So I have known that all along. But now I'm really thinking about how what the work is doing to people's bodies affects them. And so particularly with light. So, okay, we can go back to Myyrmaki, okay, because that's where I discovered the drama of light. Let's actually go back and take a look at the images again. Okay. Yeah, so one of the examples Robinson uses in her book, one of the most moving example was the Myyrmaki church. I mean, just this photograph is incredible. You have this beautiful light streaming in from above. Can you imagine just being in there all day? You're seeing this incredible drama unfold before you. Everything is considered, every last detail. I mean, it's really a symphony for the senses, just, all of them, I assuming are addressed. The shape, the rhythms, let's say, the rhythms of not just the light, but of the layered planes. So I love that it's all white. It's just really the shape of these things and how they relate to each other. Lots of planes with light streaming in from various directions, lots of layers. I'll go to another one. The rhythms created by the light fixtures that hang down. Of course, the pipe organ has its own kind of rhythms. Look at the ceiling, has that wonderful structure that, repeated kind of, I don't know what you would call them in architecture, that feature that sits down just from the ceiling. I don't know if that is functional acoustically, or if that's just, it certainly makes a strong visual impression. And here it is from the outside. It's kind of a strange structure. Oh, excuse me, I didn't even say who the architect was. This is a building that was made by Juha Leviska in Finnish architecture in, I think it was 1984, certainly in the 80s. Forgive me, that was bad. So it's strange. It looks kind of like the sort of layers of planes that appear within it, like stacked vertical planes. It's very vertical. It's very long and skinny. But here's my favorite part. Okay. So this is the walkway leading up to the church. Okay. The architect planted a mini forest of birch trees. And in reading about this, I was so struck by the author mentions the importance, the centrality of what are called primal forms in architecture, something that human-centered architecture really makes good use of. Primal forms are forms that are found in the natural environment, in the natural world, that we have a deep, deep response to because they evoke our earliest origins as a species. And I would say even before that, as our earliest origins as living beings. Our bodies contain, remember that, contain all that information that we've inherited from millions of years of evolution. We house that somewhere in our bodies. And so we have these deep responses to things like the forest, the ocean, the cave, the nest. And so these are forms that architects use. They make structures that are meant to evoke these forms. So for example, the soaring verticals inside the church might evoke the forest. Indeed, the forest leading up to the church will give visitors, a certain sense of home, shall we say, a soothing feeling, just by the nature of these. Again, they're probably not even aware that they're walking through a mini forest of soaring verticals, but what it's doing to the body, the rhythm of the verticals and the wood and the trees being reminiscent of one of our earliest homes. All of this sort of prepares the viewer for, not the viewer, sorry, the visitor. I'm used to visual art, the visitor for what is to come inside the church. So every last thing is considered. I have, for my own part, often used the forest as a motif in my work, and indeed the ocean. As I was preparing for this talk, I was thinking about other visual artists who have, whether knowingly or not, used primal forms in their work. And of course, I thought of the wonderful Hiroshi Sugimoto and his seascapes. And then I found this quote by him: "Every time I see the sea, I feel a calming sense of security, as if I'm visiting my ancestral home." Ancestral home indeed, right? We all come from the ocean. That was our first home. I think about the ocean and how it's really, I would imagine, universal. We just have, who doesn't love the beach? We all have this, it would seem, I could be wrong, this longing to be at beaches. And it's not just because they're fun, it's the ocean, right? It's really the rhythm of the waves, I would imagine, just awakens in us this deep primal memory of our first home. So this is a piece from my Myyrmaki series that, to me, is not in the show. The pieces I'm going to show now are not in the show. To me, it was about the ocean, really. I had just been to an ocean off Newburyport, actually in Massachusetts. And I remembered how much I love and long for being, by the sea. So obviously it's not a literal interpretation of the shoreline, not the shoreline, sorry, the horizon line. But I imagine, for me, I look at this and I imagine seeing through something and then seeing in the far distance that horizon where the ocean meets the sky. That's how I see this thing. And to me, the verticality and the kind of eruption of light on top is meant to evoke vastness, perhaps. This is another piece from the series. It is, to me, it's the forest. That's how I see this one. Looking through perhaps a birch forest, this birch trees just so stark in a way, but also just so beautiful. And I imagine sort of looking through a fog, perhaps at dusk, and the light coming through the trees. That's how I see this. I'm not sure anybody else would, but I certainly do. This is another one from the series. I wasn't so much thinking of primal forms with this one, but rather I was thinking about, architecture, light streaming through a window and partially illuminating something, partially disappearing behind shadows. The suggestion of well, let's say I'm drawn to things that look like they're either appearing, like in the process of appearing, or disappearing, evanescing, right? This looks to me like I've caught it just like at the moment when it's about to fully come into view. I should say the rhythm of the bands. I didn't really talk about the rhythm of the bands. The bands are not uniform. They, each one is different from the ones next to it. And the reason is that, I don't want stripes. I'm not interested in being a stripe artist. They're, the lights and darks kind of form this rhythm, right? And it turns out that's one of the things that human bodies really need, to flourish in the world. We need certain rhythms. We need, alternation between light and dark, of course, day and night. We need different textures, it turns out, different, we have these, deep primal needs as bodies, that I'm trying to speak to. So this is kind of a strange one. It's one of the early ones. I wanted to show it because you can kind of get a sense from this image of the texture, right? The texture of the paper and what I'm doing to bring it forward. As you can see, early on, I was exploring, how to make things look luminous, like they're lit from within, how to make things that look diaphanous, shapes, right? Forms, and how they can kind of how shapes can hover in a field in an evocative way. In a way, it's such a simple drawing. It's a bunch of rectangles, on a piece of paper. But every time I look at it, I'm sort of enthralled. By the way, at a certain point, artists will know this. The work we make, takes on a life. It requires a life of its own, right? So at a certain point, I am no longer its author, its maker. I am now just standing in its presence, and it's got a lot to tell me, has its own intelligence. So, when I look at this in my studio, I'm kind of encountering it as a, not an outsider, but certainly not as the owner of it, like just has its own thing. So I say that by way of explaining that I can be enthralled by something that I myself made. It's not the skill of the maker that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in having anybody who views my work, go, wow, this is skillful. No, I'm interested in the feeling that you get in front of the work, what it does to you, to change perhaps your consciousness, sort of reorient it, perhaps. This is what I'm working on now. It's unfinished. It's it's obviously the horizon figures here. It's in this one, though, I'm also thinking about framing devices, but specifically about the theater. Just what an interesting thing a stage is, or even a movie theater with this rectangle of light, and then all around it is darkness. And we go and we sort of like, sit before this rectangle of light in silence. There's something to me, I don't know, it just really evokes the sacred. So of course, when I looked at Sugimoto's work the other day for this talk, I remembered, of course, his wonderful theater photographs. He's done a whole series of these. I just love these. I love his work in general, but these are so powerful to me. Just this empty theater, these rectangles of light where something dramatic is supposed to happen or will happen. I love the way theaters frame the human drama and present it as something of interest. There's something about this. There's something about it here. And I was certainly thinking about it, not consciously, when I made this. And then after, well, it's not done, but after, in the process, I thought, gosh, that really does look like, you're looking into a screen, or maybe layers of screens onto something. I will say that mystery is hugely important to me. The work has to, in order for it to be successful, to me, it has to evoke really a sense of unknowing, of mystery. It's a certain feeling. I would call it an expansive feeling when I, or hopefully a viewer who responds to my work, has the feeling that they're being shown something that they don't know and perhaps can't know. There's a feeling of expansiveness about that, right? You could call it a spiritual feeling. I mean, expansive as in perspective expands. You yourself diminish, right? Before the mystery. I think of like being reoriented toward, let's say the numinous. I go from being the center of the world, to me, to being very tiny and part of this vast mystery. So that's sort of the feeling that I want to evoke. So we looked at that. So we're nearing the end here. And the last thing I will say, because so many people asked me at the opening and the whole time I was in Birmingham, how are these things hung? How are they affixed to the wall? All right, so I'll tell you a little bit. If you're not an artist, you might not be interested in the rest of the talk, but if you are, you might indeed be interested to know that they're magnets. It's magnets. I had used magnets before to hang work, large drawings, but in the past, I had always put the magnets on top of the drawing, right? So you could see them, even though they were black, the drawings were dark, but you could see them. And I knew that with this work, that wasn't going to cut it. I didn't want anything obstructing the field. So I came up with the idea, and this is kind of a little bit harebrained, but it worked. Be it noted, to tape the magnets to the back of the piece, right? So they're sitting back there on the back of the piece, just held in place by tape, artist tape, acid-free, archival. So there you see the anchor magnet, or the one that goes on the wall up top. There's a spacer in the middle, the one that is taped to the drawing down below. And on the right there, we have a polarity sensor. That's not the term. Anyway, it has something to do with polarity detector. So very important when you're working with magnets, okay? It can be very frustrating. You got to have a sense of the polarity. The spacer there turned out to be crucial in this installation because the magnets I got were so strong. I mean, it was just, it would have been impossible without the spacer. It would have been impossible to rip the drawings off the wall. All right. Nobody wanted that, least of all me. So we put the spacers in between. It worked perfectly. There I am, applying the tape to the back of the drawings. In the distance back there, you'll see a template. Artists may be interested to know that is how I handle the drawings. So handle in terms of like figure out where to place it when I'm installing, right? I make a template. It's exactly the size and shape of the piece. In the template are punched holes where the screws are going to go for the magnets. So I put the piece up there, and then we determine a little to the left, a little to the right. The template up there, we determine a little to the left, a little to the right, up a little. Only at the very end do we actually bring the drawing up, right? And place it against the magnets. Here are the magnets. Okay, closer view. And the tape, there are already strips of tape on the back, archival tape. So I was just taping tape to tape. You would never want to tape magnets directly to the paper, right? Because then you're going to rip the paper when you take that tape out. Here we are trying to wrangle the biggest piece up there. Is actually kind of dicey. Yeah, that's my husband there, a crucial assistant. And here we are finally trying to flip one of the drawings over. I think my husband's expression sort of sums up the emotional tenor of the day. You know, these things get hung exposed, right? They're not framed. They're incredibly fragile. I don't want anybody to touch them, even though I would like for you to long to touch them, but you can't. There's something, so when somebody buys them, they do indeed get framed. But something is lost. It's a little bit of a pity, because there's something about the fragility and vulnerability of these things. They become sort of like other living bodies. You know, you can get a real sense of this when you bring your work down south, as I did, and the paper, because of humidity, the paper curls up and it does all kinds of interesting things on the wall. It really does, you know, become a beast, a living entity. So yeah, that does get lost when it's sort of, you know, packaged behind a frame. So yeah, I'm willing to take the risk of hanging them without frames and having openings, you know, with exposed drawings. I do not fix them, meaning seal them. I should, but I don't. I haven't yet, for fear that something disastrous is going to happen. You know, you would see perhaps little droplets of the spray after hundreds of hours working on something. I really can't take that risk. So risks abound. I think we're nearing the end here. I just want to end with here, you know, we have Myyrmaki #2 back there, one of the ones that was in the show. You can see the glow a little bit. Again, takes me forever to relearn how to create that glow. Every piece is different, right? But the real reason I wanted to show you this to you, this is my studio assistant down there. That's Hildegard, the royal she. She's no longer with us, so I just wanted to throw that in there. Oh yes, one last. If you're in New York, I would love for you to come see the drawings in person. I'm going to be showing them at Studio 34 in Long Island City next month, basically in 4 weeks. So save the date. Again, if you're in the area, Saturday, March 5th, between 5 and 8 p.m., we'll have an opening. I think we'll also do a closing later, perhaps in mid-April. And I'm also going to do an artist talk. This one will be live. It is actually going to be a conversation. I've invited somebody to come and talk to me about the work and just about lots of things, ideas. So that wraps things up. I hope you have gotten something out of this presentation, and thanks for your time. Bye.